Well, hello. Thanks for sticking with us in the Psalms. We're moving through the Psalms pretty well this year, coming up on about the halfway mark pretty soon, and I'm enjoying it. I hope you are as well, and you are not only educated by what we're looking at, but also edified and encouraged. We both need encouragement during these last days, during these days of apostasy. So I thank you for so many who drop me notes of encouragement. And I hope these are encouraging you. That's my intention, is to help you stand firm. Speaking of standing firm, we're in Psalm 71 today. I really like this psalm. Really resonates with me as I get older, especially. Um, I want to finish strong. I hope you do too. So sad to see how many prominent and sometimes long term ministry leaders succumb to sin. And in my opinion, anyway, should leave their pulpits. Sometimes they're reinstated, but should leave their pulpits. I've seen just this past week two prominent, I won't name them, you can go look it up yourself, but two prominent ministry leaders, church leaders, megachurch leaders had to step back from their pulpit for sexual immorality. There's all kinds of things that could take us down. We certainly need wisdom to stand firm, don't we? I like what Martin Luther said. I think it's relevant here. It would be a good thing if young people were wise and old people were strong. But God has arranged things better. I like that. The implication, of course, is young people aren't always wise, and old people, but they're strong. Old people aren't always strong, but they're wise. So that's what we learn here in this psalm. I like the superscription here. This is mentioned this before. When it's in italics like this in my Bible, that's something the editors added. It's not in the original text. Some of the superscription, I'll point out next time we see one that is. I'll just remind you of it. But this is kind of an editorial comment from the editors of this Bible, the NASB that I use. A prayer of an old man for deliverance. So, yep, it's definitely a prayer of an old man. So, as you go through it, here's a little outline for you. His confidence in verses 1 through 8, his certainty in prayer in 9 through 13, and his commitment in verses 14 through 24. So, in that section about confidence, a few things to note here is how he refers to God. God is his refuge in verse 1, his rock in verse 3, his salvation in verse 3, a fortress in verses 3 through 7. You can imagine this impenetrable castle that you can hide in. God's his rescuer in verse 4, his hope in verse 5, his confidence in verse 5, his sustainer in verse 6, and the object of his continual praise in verse 6. I pray, brothers and sisters, that as you grow older, you can have an equally long list of things that God has done for you, things he has been for you. And you can call on those and bring those back to mind when you need it. This opens up for us verses 9 through 13, which is I've titled Certainty in Prayer. Certainty in Prayer. So he has seen how God has cared for him in the past, so he has certainty in prayer today. He prays to not be cast off in verse 9, not forsaken in verse 9, that God not be far from him in verse 12, that he'd cover his adversaries with shame and reproach and with dishonor in verse 3. This is a prayer based on that confidence in verses 1 through 8. A prayer of certainty, we could say. Not that God is being forced to do this, that he can be used at our beck and call, but based on what the psalmist has seen in the past, he's praying confidently in the present that God is going to care for him. And then finally, in verses 14 through the end of the psalm, we see 24, we see this commitment. Just a little taste of it here. A commitment to not waver from the hope that God has given him, to praise him, to not waver from praising him, from not waver from providing testimony. Just talking to a brother this week, and he was telling me about some of the tests that God has successfully seen him through. And each of those successful tests become a testimony, don't they? They become a testimony of God's faithfulness. Will not back off from teaching in verses 16 to 18. He's going to tell others what he's been taught. And it brings us to our highlight verse, verse 18 here. Love what it says. You can perhaps, some of you identify it with it more than others, but even when I am old and gray, O God, do not forsake me until I declare your strength to this generation, your power to all who are to come. You know, old and gray indicates that he's anticipating and resolving to seek God's fellowship even as his life begins to wane and draw to an end. It's making a resolution here. And it says, until I declare. I think it recognizes that there's always work to do. Even as we grow old, as we grow gray, as the wisdom accumulates and the strength flees, that we have dependence on God here to strengthen us long enough to do the work he has given us to do. Until here doesn't talk about so much a limit to the steadfastness and support of God. He's not saying, forsake me after I declare your strength to this generation. That's not the point. He's expressing really the confidence, I'd say, or a prayer to God that strength would continue until his work is done. And that's what we all ask for. And he's got something to say. He's got something to say here, until I declare. And there's two things. First, your strength, and then your power. These are the two messages of an old man, an old believer, a mature believer for the future generation. God has proven himself to be strong, and God expresses his strength through the exercise of his power. Therefore, he can be relied on to do all that's trusted. You and I, as we grow older and older, we accumulate more and more evidence of how strong and powerful God is. Not only is he able, but he is willing. And he has shown himself to be both willing and able over and over in our lives. And we have a message to bring. You and I have work to do. We will live long enough to accomplish it. So I think we should, in terms of application, follow this example and resolve to do the work and pray for God to sustain us as long as we need to. Make that resolution now. Make that resolution to finish strongly, not to drift away, not to fall, not to hesitate or stumble, but to stand firm. Make that resolution now so that even when you are old and gray, you're looking forward to declaring God's strength and his power to generations to come. Let's make this very specific to respond to it. I say in prayer today, ask the Lord to give you strength and health into your old age so that you can be a testimony to family and friends. Pray for him to guide you into your eating, into your drinking, into your exercising, and to do all those things that are necessary that you might be able to fruitfully and effectively serve him for as long as you possibly can. And then pray specifically for others, not just for yourself, but pray specifically and name the names of those who you want to tell of the strength and power of God. If that's a short list right now, if you can't think of anyone, turn to the Lord. Ask him to bring people into your life, to bring them across your path. You may be surprised. Maybe somebody at the grocery store who stops to talk. Sometimes what happens to me is I'll be out on a bike path and somebody will strike up a conversation and they are really lonely and needing counsel and looking to find help. So if that happens to you, here's your opportunity to do the work that God has given you to do. So God bless you, brothers and sisters. You got some homework from this psalm, and I pray that the Lord would sustain you and keep you faithful well into a long and happy and productive and fruitful life. God bless you.